On this episode of ResiWeek, we wrap up 2021 looking back at 3 of the most popular stories of 2021. All this and more on this episode of ResiWeek.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is ResiWeek, episode 308, a look back at 2021.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by
Just Add Power
and by Audio.
Welcome to this episode of ResiWeek. This is your weekly roundup of all the latest news and stories for the residential AV industry. I'm your host, Matty Scott for AVNation.tv. This week, we have no guests. We are going to look back at the whole of 2021 and highlight the news that made the most impact throughout the year. Let's get started with a story that cannot be understated. It is the current supply chain issue. It has been a large list of factors that have led up to this issue, including the lack of workers at the height of the pandemic, the semiconductor shortage caused by the droughts, and all the other issues in manufacturing countries like Taiwan, etc., the blockage of the Suez Canal back in March. This issue has affected not just the AV industry or the electronic manufacturer industry as a whole, but literally every single vertical and business. As we start at ResiWeek 265, as the news was just starting to emerge, and talked with Mitchell Klein about the factors that come into play with this shortage and what integrators can do in the midst of it.
Okay, so first of all, I can give you the perspective from Silicon Labs, and we're providing silicon for everyone from Tesla to microphones and to a lot of consumer electronics. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so you've got basically 3 companies that are really building these high-end chips, these high-quality chips. Now, when you take one of them and say, okay, let's boycott them, let's prevent them from coming in. So what you have is the perfect storm. Yep. Perfect storm. Couldn't be any better than this, right? Between the fire of the company in Japan, which was a little bit of a setback, but not terrible. Then you end up with a trade war. So then you've got, a good, maybe a third of the supply line that we can't bring into the U.S. We can't build products. Mm-hmm. Then you had a pandemic on top of that, where the chip companies shut down manufacturing because of pandemic issues. Then add on top of that, demand for wafers is only going to continue to grow dramatically every year. I mean, look at the stock market, look at companies, maybe ours, look at others. Everything has a chip in it, and if it doesn't, it will, period. And that's everything, you name it. So where are these all going to come from when you really only got 3 factories supplying them? Well, I think we have to look past that. And you got Samsung, who's one of the big ones, building more, but that's more Samsung. Yeah. So, where are we going to go with that? Well, let's just say that it's an enormous opportunity for me. I'm thrilled. This is great. I'm not the sales guy that has to tell my company, my customer, I should say, that I'm going to give you 30% of your orders now, right? Yeah. But demand's up. And I think overall, this is going to be a good thing because we're going to realize we're relying on so few for such a big, big thing. We'll see where it goes.
Very good. Giles, I'm thrilled that you're on for this one. Because one of the biggest things that we've seen kind of as an effect of this has been obviously the lack of consumer electronics that have been available. If you tried to buy a receiver the last 3-4 months, you were waiting 3 to 4 months. I know specifically we have a project that we sold the middle of October. We got the check. We placed the order. We still haven't got that receiver. It's still not even in our supplier's warehouse to come to us. It's the 1st of March. How do integrators deal with this level of scarcity in products? There's been a couple articles about it. There's been lots of ranting on Facebook about manufacturers not keeping up. And, some manufacturers seem to get more hate about that than others. We're not going to name any names on that one. But it's something where I know our company, we've procured product anywhere we can just to close the deal. How do you go about in March of 2021 quoting projects where you need product that you have no idea when you might be able to get your hands on it?
Well, I think this is a huge issue for integrators because, as we all know, the majority of integrators don't have inventory, don't keep stock, and I can see, having been a past integrator myself, where there can be challenges here, like the sort of time scales that you mentioned there, Matt. You know how hard it is to get clients to pay in advance for product. If you're saying you're going to have to pay, actually, yes, in general. So if you're asking for customers to pay 3 months in advance, and then there's no guarantee you're even going to get the product after 3 months, it's a huge issue. I can see also potential problems as well for integrators where they then have to select equipment that they're maybe not used to working with, so having to settle for other equipment. So there could be reliability and performance issues with the systems that they're installing, but or maybe having to go for less high quality products. So there's maybe performance issues as well. But I think the only way around it is to keep the dialogue with the customer open and just be very clear with them up front. And that's the best thing that integrators can really do. But as Mitch said, it is an absolute sort of perfect storm, really. And I think ultimately, unfortunately, the homeowner is probably going to be the one that suffers the most because of the product that's actually installed. It's not necessarily what the integrator would want to install if it was a first choice.
Hey, and how many of your products, Giles, are sitting outside the port of Los Angeles on a container ship that they can't bring in? So, add that too, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So eBay can be your friend then, right?
It can be. Not a lot of integrators make much money from purchasing from eBay, but maybe it moves more to integrators also sort of adopting more of a servicing model for customers as well, if customers are procuring their own equipment. But again, it gets into a really difficult territory there because integrators are working with products that they're not used to. So either way, it's not a great situation for the industry right now.
But the conditions might enable an integrator to give a logical reason why you need to give me the money up front. I need to order the stuff 4 months ahead or something, right?
Absolutely.
Is the situation, dare I say, dire enough now that, to Mitch's point, you can effectively go to your client and say, hey, we need full payment for equipment up front because we're ordering it, we're submitting our payments, and we have to get you into a queue. And then be able to, not to tie the two stories together, but pull up a Best Buy website and say, see, nothing. Even Best Buy has nothing. Are we to that point?
I think it could create a sense of urgency for sure. I mean, it's kind of weird to think of it that way, right? A sense of urgency, but it's like, hurry up and wait. Give me your money now so that maybe in this year we can fulfill your entire project. But I also think the homeowners being hit from that through plumbing, through GCs, everybody's pouring money into their homes, and I'm sure I just went and got new appliances and I got hit with, we don't have that. What's the next option?
Yeah.
And that right there is kind of cool too. What's the next option? I'll take the better model or 2 up from where you had me at, if that's available.
Our next story may not come as a shock to the majority of you, but if you have been seeing the signs, it was made official this year that Logitech would be closing down the Harmony line of universal remotes. Now, while they're not necessarily, the go-to for everyone, they were the number one best known, entry-level multifunction remotes. Logitech had acquired the original manufacturers of the Harmony remote back in 2004 when universal remotes were just the next big thing in the public eye. But now, in the success of streaming services and smartphones, remotes have stagnated in their popularity and usefulness for a lot of the general public. In ResiWeek 271, Bradford Ben starts out talking about how the industry and its technology has grown since the rise of universal remotes and what integrators could be showcasing for their customers in its stead.
I agree with you that it's the last of the mass market configurable remotes for those who want to dive into smart things and using the Valve open architecture to create your own panels or doing other home automations, such as, we can pick many of them. I think there are a couple that someone might know something about this. So I do think it's important to say it's the off-the-shelf
Yes.
user configurable, not the non-user configurable. I do think it's a sea change of things that might not be obvious to everyone, and I might be wrong.
Is it the end of the era of, because obviously there's a slew of professionally installed solutions. That's what, my company does all day. That's part of what Alex supports. Is this the end of an era for DIY without digging really deep into, building your own panels, et cetera?
I think so, but I also think it's not needed as much. I'll use this as a couple examples. HDMI, high density media interface, or high definition media interface, depending who you ask, has CEC control, which is consumer electronics control. So you got all my acronyms spelled out.
This. Thank you.
But what it allows you to do is all of a sudden the remotes start talking across HDMI, and they're starting to get smarter. So like my Apple TV controls my receipt, controls my display, controls the volume on my home theater, does this, does that. And I don't need a smarter remote because the devices themselves are starting to get smarter and understand that for a home theater system, not necessarily the high-end, $1 million home theater system that's always going to need customization, but the $2,000 consumer, buy it at a box store, put it in together, for it to be successful, the pieces have to work together. And I think that's why Harmony started to lose traction, and many of the programmable remotes started to lose traction because I didn't have to do anything to configure my devices to start talking with each other. I just plugged in my HDMIs and started using the remote, and my display can control my Apple TV. My Apple TV can control my display. My remote can control Blu-ray. And it's like I have one remote. I didn't have to customize anything. Does it do everything I want perfectly? No. Is it good enough to hit 80% of the time, which is what the market wants? And the other 20%, I keep the remotes in the arm of the couch, So I don't think it's a loss. I think it's migration and the marketplace needing and pushing to have this integrated into the smarter products, into making it easier for someone to use. Once again, I'll go back to my standard. Apple didn't invent the MP3. Apple just made it the easiest thing to use with the iPod. Whereas before, MP3s where you needed to be a nerd that could download them, transfer them, burn them to a CD, do something with them. And it made the interface work, and it made that successful. That's the same thing a lot of the manufacturers are doing with this. And then you add on top of it, kind of as a detour, how many devices already have Wi-Fi smart remotes that they have an app for? So do you need a Harmony remote at that point? I can control my display off my phone. It's perfectly fine. I can write an if then that if I really want to get customization in there. I don't really need an IR customized device now because so much is IP control. And that's internet protocol.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just jump in here. I mean, I think there are a number of interesting dynamics at play. The first one is just being fully transparent. One of the most requested products we get is to build a Josh remote. It's the type of thing where if you're controlling a TV by voice control, it's great if you want to go right to a certain piece of content, or if you want to switch to an input. It's really annoying if you want to browse, right? The idea of just navigating around a Netflix interface by voice is not ideal. And we get the requests all the time because as many people, as there are who enjoy Control 4, just as many don't. And same with Crestron, and same with Savant, and sometimes it's a matter of cost. And so we have plenty of dealers that like to use the Harmony remote in a Josh environment as your handheld universal remote. And as a result, many, many months ago, we got a call that this was going to happen. And, it was a very hush-hush call. It was, early on. But we reached out to Logitech and we said, look, we get the request for something like this all the time. If you're really going to, moonlight this product, do you have any interest in selling? Do you have any interest in divesting or doing anything? We literally did not get a response back for many, many, many months until it kind of became publicly known. And the response that came back was, yeah, we're not really interested in doing anything with this. We're just going to shut it down. And that's a little disheartening because I feel like someone, be it us or someone else, could make something of value here. And so then you ask yourself the question, are they shutting it down because ultimately it's a product that is losing its need in the industry? Is it kind of losing its numbers, or does it just not make sense for Logitech? And I firmly believe it's the latter. I truly believe from what we're seeing, people want a universal remote. They want something like what Harmony does, what Neo does, what Crestron does. It's a needed product. The price points tend to be pretty high for these products. So a low cost product that doesn't rely on a control system makes sense. But one of the stats that I've seen flown around, and I don't know if it's true or not, the stat that I've seen is that Harmony accounts for less than 5% of Logitech's revenue, but something like 95% of their support calls. And so it makes sense when you're a company that's generating $1 billion in revenue, if a product line's making you $50 million, but your staff is largely weighed towards maintaining that product, you're dealing with a lot of support, it's integrating with lots of products that are constantly updating and changing, it might just not make sense for them. But I do believe that the product category makes sense for someone, for others. And so I think for the time being, this might drive certain dealers and customers up a little bit to do more Crestron, do more Control 4, do more Savant. But I also think it's going to open up the opportunity for more startups. There are a couple I know I can't talk about, but that will be releasing in the next year or two that are trying to do sort of a competing product with really interesting cutting edge features. And so I don't think this product category is going away, but I do think it makes sense for Logitech based on just how much bigger their other product lines are for their business.
Is it something, Alex, where to Bradford's point, for a lot of systems, you can get away with using an Apple TV remote, the Samsung or the Sony remote that comes with the TV, the cable company's remote, and do 90% of what you need to do in the average, TV system. When you look at Harmony, it never seemed to make enough inroads in the CI channel. It was so heavily DIY. Is that kind of going to be the continual issue for anybody playing in this space, that DIY is so tech support heavy?
Just to kind of cut you off on that one, they didn't make inroads into the CI space because they didn't want to. They truly didn't integrate with other companies. They didn't want to. They didn't open that up. They didn't build a business model that made sense for dealers. A lot of companies see, Nest got acquired for over $3 billion. They look at Sonos's consumer business. They look at a lot of these DIY products, and they feel like that's the path towards success, where the reality is this channel is a very strong channel for a lot of products. And I do think they could have tried a little bit harder to integrate and create a sales cycle that made sense for the business that we're in. And if they had done so, I think we would have seen a lot more integrators adopting the products, because I do think they're great products. But I know from a business and an integration perspective, they really didn't, they not only didn't make it easy, they didn't even try. I shouldn't even say that. They put up barriers. They made it intentionally difficult for our channel to work with them.
Our last story almost ties in with the previous one, as the Connectivity Standards Alliance rebranded their Project Chip standard into Matter. This partnership includes many manufacturers like Amazon, Apple, Google, Samsung, and more. This new standard focuses on the principles of simplicity, interoperability, and security to change the smart home landscape. We talked with Mitchell Klein in ResiWeek 280 to discuss why Matter should matter to integrators in the residential space.
Just to fully understand it, that Project Connected Home over IP is a subset. You're a member of the Zigbee Alliance, and then you kind of join up with the working group that was developing it. And I think it's really important to understand that the intent is for complete interoperability and to make things just work together. And when you say that, you also must understand that there's millions and hundreds of millions of devices out in the marketplaces all around the world that will not be turned off, because in order for the promise of Matter to be realized, all those hundreds of millions of devices must also work within that same Matter platform. And it will. But what we also have to recognize is it's going to start off small with a few things and continue to grow from that point on. So from a Z-Wave perspective, we're thrilled because we've been saying this for 20 years. Things must interoperate. Things must be backwards compatible. Things must be secure. And again, I can go on, and I'd actually let, maybe perhaps my associate here, Mariusz, can really speak to a number of those promises that Z-Wave makes that we expect will be fulfilled through the Matter group as well.
That's a really good question, Marius. When you see this from the Alarm.com standpoint, that's a huge consumer-facing brand, right? When people buy into ADC, they're assuming that all of their smart products are just going to work on that platform. And the majority of them do, but obviously there's always an outlier that doesn't. What does Matter mean to you guys from the ADC side, and to Mitch's point, from the Z-Wave side?
So again, we welcome interoperability. I think that's spot on where the industry needs to go, right? And again, to Mitch's point, we've been there for 20 or so years. And when you look at the market that you enter as a, let's say, security dealer, they come into the house, the last thing they want to say is, oh, by the way, for our system to work, you have to replace your door lock, thermostat, garage door opener. That's not what we do. We would rather focus on getting all those devices work together. So again, interoperable standards are very welcome in our business, right? That allows us to deploy the system much easier and not worry about one-offs.
Yeah, very good. Jamie, my concern every time I see a new standard is we usually have just got our customer base to sort of understand even just the terminology that we're talking about. The second that, GAFA starts talking about chip, it's another thing that is, again, part of Matter, et cetera. But it's another phrase, it's another term. Is there anything we can do as integrators to really help our clients understand that? Or is it something that we kind of just need to, again, take the approach of, we're just going to make everything work?
I think our approach should be that we're the filter through which information flows to our clients. And we need to know what's happening. We need to know the trajectory of their system that we're putting in their house. And as much as possible, have our eye to the future. But I don't know if we need to talk about every technology possibility between the standards and what have you, because it'll change, a week later or a month later, or by the time they actually move in. So I think that we need to be aware of this, certainly, and talk amongst ourselves and learn in our industry and let our clients know there's changes on the horizon, similar to, the analog sunset when everything went digital and we went from component to HDMI. There was a transition there, and we knew in our industry that was happening before a lot of consumers.
Yeah.
So we could hold them back by continuing one type of old infrastructure, or we could move them forward in a digital way. So I think that's our approach. Really, I'm excited to see this. Mitch, I've known you've been talking about interoperability since you asked me to volunteer for CEDIA, over almost a decade ago. Yep. So I think this is fantastic, really.
Yeah, just let me point out one other thing, Matt, which wasn't mentioned in the article, that, again, to geek out just a little bit, Matter is only an application layer, and it's going to require network and transports and PHYs and all those other aspects. And so for the time being, the group has landed upon Thread, which is basically nothing more than a network standard, and Wi-Fi, which we all know is a network standard. And those two do not interoperate. Yeah. And so in order for that promising, and this is just the beginning of it, they actually have to have this thing that I guess they're calling a border router. We can call it a gateway. You can call it a hub. Essentially, they're all one and the same. And the purpose is, at this point, is to make sure that Thread devices work with Wi-Fi devices. And you can easily move on from that and say, okay, and Zigbee devices, and Z-Wave devices, and Bluetooth. So you can see where that's going to go, and that's where the promise is.
Ian, let's wrap this before we move on. My concern every time I see partnerships and alliances and everything else, especially with the big four brands, is that at some point they might get bored and move on. Is that a concern, or is this a big enough entity that we will be less concerned with that?
I think, what the work that Mitch has been doing for so long on interoperability, this whole conversation we're having, the fact that we've got Apple, Google, Amazon, and those people a part of this program is showing you that there is some serious movement behind this and support that will continue to go on for a long time. I personally don't see from being in control systems and integrating homes and trying to get platforms to communicate together, I see this as a very big positive. I wanted to touch on one thing. I know I've heard some concerns of people thinking that this is going to take business or work away from integrators, and in fact I think it's the exact opposite, that it's going to help the platforms be more connected and allow for more opportunities, and it may be that there's less custom coding on the back end, but means there's more ability to integrate subsystems and there's more design opportunities available. So I think this is a very good opportunity for the industry as a whole.
Add to that, Ian, the fact that customers will have good experiences, and I think that's really important too.
Mitch, let me just ask you this before we move on. What can manufacturers do to bring their existing customers who have, Z-Wave and a variety of devices into this platform?
Well, I mean, I can put on my Silicon Labs hat and say that what we're looking at here really are building blocks. Mm-hmm. And so essentially there'll be a block that will say, okay, Z-Wave, here's how you're going to connect to Matter. Matter, here's how you're going to connect to Z-Wave. So if you're manufacturing Z-Wave products right now, keep on going, because you got the best platform that exists with the best ecosystems out there. And yeah, you will be able to work with Matter devices as well. Just a matter of time.
Thanks for joining us. If you'd like to connect with me, you can reach me at Matt D. Scott on Twitter and most other social platforms. But more importantly, please visit AVNation.tv, where you'll find this show as well as a wide variety of other shows with all the verticals that we cover. When you visit the website, please take a moment to check out our supporters. We are extremely thankful for their support and ask that you check them out as well. Thanks again for watching and listening to every episode we've had this year. 2021 has been entertaining to say the least, but we're looking forward to a great slew of shows for 2022. Hopefully you can join us. Thanks again for watching. That's all the time we have for this episode of ResiWeek.